Before Homer, before the Bible, before every story we think we know, there was one tale, the oldest written story in human history. Carved into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, it tells of a king who dared to defy the gods, Gilgamesh. This is humanity's very first epic, and welcome to Twilight Tales. Chapter 1, The King and the Wild Man. Part 1, Gilgamesh, King of Uruk. In the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, between the majestic rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates, rose a splendid city whose name still resonates through the ages, Uruk. Its colossal walls stretched for miles, built with sun-dried clay bricks, testaments to an ingenious people who had mastered earth, water, and fire to create civilization. Uruk was a city of temples and palaces, a crossroads where merchants, scribes, and priests mingled, a hub of knowledge and traditions. But at the pinnacle of this glory reigned a king whose greatness was both a source of admiration and fear, Gilgamesh. It is said that he was not a man like others. According to myths, 2/3 God, 1/3 human, he had been granted unparalleled strength, radiant beauty, and vigor surpassing that of all mortals. His body shone like polished bronze, his shoulders were as broad as a bull's, and his steps made the earth tremble. The clay tablets that have come down to us describe Gilgamesh as an exceptional being, destined to accomplish unforgettable feats and to etch his name into the heart of eternity. Yet this greatness was a burden, for Gilgamesh in his pride ruled with an iron hand. He dominated the people of Uruk not as a benevolent father, but as an imperious master. His subjects, who admired him for his power, also suffered from his excesses. He claimed the right over life and death, took riches without restraint, demanded exhausting labors, and even the women of Uruk feared his insatiable will. For the king, in his divine arrogance, knew no limits. The ancients recount that the inhabitants, crushed by this yoke, turned to the gods to implore their aid. The priests made sacrifices in the temples, burned incense, and their supplications rose to the starry sky. In the palaces of the deities, the gods heard the people's cry. Anu, the master of the heavens, and Aruru, the great goddess of creation, conferred. They knew that Gilgamesh, to temper his pride and learn wisdom, needed an equal, a companion capable of standing up to him, confronting him, and sharing the weight of his destiny. Thus, the gods decided to fashion a wild man, born from clay and divine breath. This man, who would soon be named Enkidu, was meant to balance Gilgamesh's power, as shadow balances light. But for now, Uruk remained under the unchallenged authority of its king. Each day, Gilgamesh strode through the city with confidence, inspecting the walls, organizing titanic works, erecting temples and palaces. His ambition seemed boundless. He wanted his works to defy time, his name to be carved into the very bricks of Uruk for eternity. And it is true that under his reign, the city flourished. Canals irrigated the fields, harvests abounded, artisans crafted splendid objects, and scribes recorded the people's stories and accounts on their tablets. But behind this prosperity lurked fear, for Gilgamesh tolerated no disobedience. In smoky taverns and bustling markets, the inhabitants whispered. Some called the king a tyrant. Others said he was simply too great to be understood by men. All agreed on one thing: no one could oppose him. His soldiers, loyal and fearsome, carried out his orders without hesitation. His advisors rarely dared to challenge his voice. He was like a storm, majestic but destructive. Yet behind this image of power, Gilgamesh was not without torment. Though he believed himself invincible, he sometimes felt the weight of his mortality. The gods had endowed him with superhuman gifts, but they had not granted him immortality. In the secrecy of his dreams, he glimpsed the shadow of death. That veil even kings could not push back. Perhaps it was this anguish that drove him to build ceaselessly, to amass conquests and feats, as if he sought to defy time itself. It is in this context that the epic truly begins. The people, weary of suffering, continued to beseech the gods, and the gods, moved by their prayers, prepared Gilgamesh's destiny, for soon his path would cross that of Enkidu, the wild man of the steppes, free and untamed. But for now in Uruk, the murmur of complaints rose like a persistent wind. The king, despite all his greatness, was alone, without equal, without friend, prisoner of his own excess. Thus stands before us the figure of the king of Uruk, a being both splendid and terrible, loved and feared, demigod and mortal. His legend had not yet reached its zenith, but already his name echoed in the temples and on the lips of scribes. Gilgamesh, the mighty, he who walked among men like a lion among herds, and in the heavens, the gods, observing his stride, were already preparing the trial that would transform his destiny. Part 2. The Creation of Enkidu. In the celestial heights, where the gods who govern human destinies reside, the complaints of Uruk's people rose like thick smoke. Sacrifices piled up on the altars. The priests' chants echoed in temples of clay and stone. Men and women raised their arms to Anu, the master of the heavens, and to Aruru, the mother goddess, imploring justice against the insatiable pride of their king. The gods, moved by these lamentations, gathered in council. The matter was grave: how to restrain Gilgamesh, whose strength had no equal; how to restore balance without destroying the greatness of the one they had themselves fashioned with such power. Then Aruru, the great goddess of creation, spoke. She alone could shape an answer worthy of this challenge. "Let there be created," she said, "a being in his image, his equal in vigor and courage, a man who will stand up to him, confront him, and share the weight of his destiny." Thus Aruru plunged her hands into the clay of the rivers. She shaped a human form, broad-shouldered, powerful-armed, and breathed into it the breath of life. Thus was born Enkidu, the wild man. His hair covered his body like a mane, his skin had the roughness of the steppe, and his gaze shone with the pure brilliance of free beasts. Enkidu knew neither city nor the laws of men. He wandered the plains, surrounded by antelopes and lions. His steps followed the tracks of herds, and he drank from streams alongside the animals. He protected the beasts against hunters, breaking their traps, freeing their nets. The wild animals loved him like a brother, and he lived among them in primal harmony, still unknown to the men of Uruk. But soon hunters noticed his presence. They saw with fear this naked colossus, this protector of herds who ruined their hunts. Their arrows and nets were powerless against him, for Enkidu was stronger than they, more cunning too, and the animals rallied to his side. The hunters, terrified, went to Uruk, to Gilgamesh. They spoke of this strange man. He resembles a man, but he is closer to the beasts. He frees the game from our traps, undoes our work, and no one can confront him. Gilgamesh, intrigued, understood that this being was no ordinary man. He sensed that the gods had sent a rival, perhaps even a companion. So he ordered the hunters to return to the steppe, this time accompanied by a woman, Shamhat, a temple priestess and sacred courtesan. For Gilgamesh knew that the wisdom and gentleness of women could tame what brute force could not. The hunters obeyed, and they led Shamhat to the plain. There, near a watering hole where Enkidu came to drink with the beasts, they waited. When Enkidu appeared, massive and wild, Shamhat stepped forward. She unveiled herself, sat on the grass, and called to him. The woman's beauty and her scent drew Enkidu. He approached, curious, like a lion drawn to a flame. Then Shamhat welcomed him, and they united for 6 days and 7 nights in an embrace that bound nature to civilization. When Enkidu finally rose, he sought to rejoin the animals, but the gazelles fled. For now he had tasted the bread and wine of the woman, and his heart beat to the rhythm of men. The steppe no longer recognized him as one of its own. Shamhat took his hand and said, "You are great, Enkidu, but your greatness will find meaning only among men. Come with me to Uruk, the city of walls, where you will meet Gilgamesh. There you will discover your destiny." Enkidu hesitated, his gaze turning to the hills he called home. But a new force stirred within him, the desire to understand, to discover, and to confront this king he had heard of. So he followed Shamhat. On the road to Uruk, the priestess taught him the ways of men, how to eat baked bread, how to drink wine, how to sit among men and listen to the songs of musicians. Each step he took distanced him further from the wild world and brought him closer to his destiny. And so, Enkidu, the man shaped by the gods, left the plains to enter the history of men. The gods had created his breath to balance Gilgamesh, to ease Uruk's suffering, and to teach its king the value of friendship and humility. But neither he, nor Shamhat, nor even Gilgamesh could yet foresee how their meeting would shake the order of the world. Part 3. The Meeting and the Duel. When Shamhat led Enkidu to the gates of Uruk, the city buzzed like a hive. The markets overflowed with fruits, grains, and fabrics. Artisans hammered bronze. Scribes carved cuneiform signs on still wet clay tablets, and priests climbed the steps of ziggurats to offer incense and prayers to the gods. Above it all rose the colossal walls, vast as a mountain shaped by human hands, the pride of Gilgamesh. Enkidu, who had grown up among plains and beasts, was both awestruck and troubled. His eyes lingered on the crowd, the architecture, the tumult of human voices. He advanced with the quiet strength of one who knows no fear, but each step brought him closer to his destiny, the meeting with Gilgamesh. In the streets of Uruk, rumors were already spreading. People spoke of this man from the steppe, wild and powerful, tamed by Shamhat. They whispered that he was the king's equal, created by the gods to balance his fury. The elders, sitting in the shade of the walls, murmured that Gilgamesh's hour was approaching, the hour when he would finally meet a worthy adversary. That moment came sooner than expected, for on that very day, Gilgamesh, true to his habits, had claimed a sacred right to possess a young bride before her husband, according to the custom he imposed. The people, humiliated and weary of this royal whim, watched the scene with contained anger, but no one dared intervene. No one except Enkidu. Enkidu stepped forward, his massive body blocking the king's path. His voice, deep as thunder, resounded, "You shall not pass, Gilgamesh. These abuses must end. The people suffer from your arrogance. I am your equal, and I will prevent you from further crushing your own." A silence fell over Uruk. Never had anyone dared speak to the king this way. The guards, stunned, did not dare raise their weapons. Gilgamesh, surprised at first, burst into laughter. He scrutinized this colossus, still rough from the plains, and his eyes gleamed with a strange mix of challenge and admiration. "Who are you, stranger, to dare block my path? Do you know that I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, 2/3 divine, invincible among men?" But Enkidu did not back down. Then the king, stung in his pride, lunged at him. The duel was titanic. In the streets of Uruk, the stones echoed under their steps. The two giants clashed like raging bulls, grappling, lifting each other, rolling on the ground. Their arms were like beams, their fists like hammers. They broke doors, cracked walls, and raised clouds of dust. The spectators, frozen, watched these forces of nature collide, unable to say who would triumph. Gilgamesh roared. Determined to prove he remained the master, Enkidu resisted with the fury of freedom, refusing to yield. Their struggle seemed endless, as each found in the other an equal strength. For the first time in his life, Gilgamesh felt his muscles weaken, his breath falter. For the first time, he met resistance that forced him to surpass himself. Finally, after long hours of relentless effort, the combat halted. Gilgamesh, exhausted but standing, managed to pin Enkidu with a sudden move. The wild man, panting, felt the king's grip and acknowledged his power. But Gilgamesh, instead of striking a fatal blow, loosened his hold. Their eyes met, burning no longer with hatred, but with respect. Then, in the restored silence, Gilgamesh extended his hand. Enkidu grasped it. This simple yet immense gesture sealed a friendship stronger than any battle. The two adversaries became brothers in arms. Uruk, which had held its breath, erupted in shouts and songs. For the people understood that this duel was not the birth of a war, but of a brotherhood. Gilgamesh had found his equal, and with him a new era began. From then on, Gilgamesh and Enkidu walked together. Their friendship, born in the clash of battle, would lead them to even greater adventures. Expeditions against terrible monsters, confrontations with the gods themselves, and a quest that would cross the boundaries of life and death. But for now, in the streets of Uruk, two men stood side by side, bound forever, and the gods in the heavens smiled. Their purpose was fulfilled. Chapter 2. The Great Trials. Part 1. The Quest for Glory. After their memorable combat, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were no longer rivals, but brothers bound by a sacred friendship. Their bond was as solid as the bricks of Uruk, forged in sweat, blood, and respect. From then on, they walked together through the city's streets, and the people who once trembled before their king began to look at Gilgamesh with different eyes. For a man who has a true companion is no longer alone in his pride, and his power finds a measure. But Gilgamesh, despite this new brotherhood, remained hungry for greatness. His strength, youth, and divine blood drove him to seek immortality through the glory of deeds. Enkidu's friendship awakened in him the desire to achieve acts no man had ever accomplished. And among these feats, one shone like an unattainable flame: to defeat Humbaba, the fearsome guardian of the Cedar Forest. This forest, located far beyond known borders, was a sacred place. Its trees, taller than Uruk's walls, rose toward the heavens like divine columns. Their fragrance spread for leagues, and their rare, precious wood was sought to build temples and palaces. But the gods had entrusted its guardianship to Humbaba, a fearsome monster whose face terrified men and whose roar froze the hearts of the bravest. His breath was fire, his voice a torrent, and the 7 cloaks of aura he wore surrounded him with supernatural power. One day, Gilgamesh said to Enkidu, "Friend, are we not the strongest among men? Are we not destined to accomplish deeds that will echo through the ages? So let us go together to the Cedar Forest, slay Humbaba, and carve our names into eternity." Enkidu, who knew the harshness of nature and the danger of beasts, hesitated. He, who had grown up among animals, knew that Humbaba was not a mere foe, but a sacred power. His face paled when Gilgamesh spoke of this plan. "No, brother," he said, "this monster is not like the others. His voice is thunder, his breath is death. The gods themselves appointed him guardian, and he who challenges him incurs their wrath. Let us stay in Uruk, enjoy what we have built. Glory can be found elsewhere." But Gilgamesh would not hear reason. A consuming ambition burned in his heart. He wanted more than the throne of Uruk. He wanted the immortality of legends. His eyes blazed, and his passionate words eventually swayed Enkidu. "Friend," Gilgamesh replied, "life is short even for us. Men die, kings fade, and their names vanish into dust. But he who accomplishes the impossible lives forever in the memory of men. I do not fear Humbaba. With you by my side, I am certain we will triumph." Enkidu, torn between caution and friendship, finally yielded, for he loved Gilgamesh like a brother and could not abandon him in this quest. Together, they went to consult the city's elders and temple priests. The wise men, seated in a circle, listened to the king's plan. Their faces darkened with concern. One of them spoke, "Gilgamesh, you are young and powerful, but your heart is reckless. Humbaba is not a mere enemy. He is the servant of the gods. If you go, you endanger Uruk and your own reign." But the king remained steadfast, and seeing that he would not relent, the elders gave their blessings, praying to Shamash, the sun god, to watch over him. Gilgamesh offered sacrifices. He burned incense, poured wine and oil, and sought divine favor. The next day, he gathered his weapons. He had a colossal axe forged, its weight alone enough to crush an ordinary man, and a sword with blade sharp as a lion's fang. Enkidu too took up his weapons, though his heart remained uneasy. Then, before the assembled people, Gilgamesh proclaimed, "I, king of Uruk, set out with my brother Enkidu to face Humbaba. I will return with glory, or I will perish in honor. May the sun guide us, and may the gods deem us worthy of this feat." The people cheered, torn between pride and fear. For if their king succeeded, his name would resonate forever. But if he failed, Uruk would lose its protector. Thus began the march to the Cedar Forest. The two companions crossed fertile plains, forded rivers, and left known lands to venture into the unknown. Each step brought them closer to the monster, and each step resounded like a challenge to the gods. Part 2. The Expedition to the Cedar Forest. The plains of Mesopotamia gradually faded behind them. Gilgamesh and Enkidu walked side by side, their weapons gleaming under the blazing sun, their hearts beating in unison. Before them stretched lands few men had trodden. Each step took them farther from Uruk and closer to the Cedar Forest, that sacred domain guarded by Humbaba, the dreaded monster. The journey was long and fraught with trials. They crossed rivers with raging currents, climbed hills covered with scorching stones, and faced hunger and fatigue. Yet neither Gilgamesh nor Enkidu faltered. The king of Uruk, driven by his thirst for glory, encouraged his friend with a firm voice. "Courage, brother! Each step we take brings our names closer to eternity." But Enkidu, closer to the wisdom of nature, observed the signs around them. The stars, the direction of the winds, the cries of animals, all spoke to him of an approaching danger. Several times he asked Gilgamesh to slow down, to pray more, to consult dreams. For Enkidu knew that Humbaba was no ordinary foe. Each evening before sleeping, Gilgamesh prayed to Shamash, the sun god, for protection and courage. He offered sacrifices, lit a fire, and recited incantations. And each night, strange dreams troubled his sleep. One night, he dreamed that a mountain collapsed on him, but a being of light supported him and saved him from being crushed. Another night, he saw a celestial bull charge at him, only to calm when Enkidu stood by his side. Troubled, Gilgamesh recounted his visions to his friend at dawn. Enkidu, grave, interpreted the dreams. "These omens mean you are not alone. The gods watch over you, and I, too, will be your support. But do not forget, what we face surpasses human strength." As they advanced, the landscape changed. The air grew thick, laden with resin and mystery. The trees, at first sparse, became taller, darker, their massive trunks forming columns of an invisible temple. The ground darkened, covered with needles and roots. The sunlight struggled to pierce the canopy of cedars, and a strange silence enveloped the forest. Gilgamesh stopped, looking up at the dizzying heights of the trees. "Here," he said, "is the dwelling of Humbaba. No city, no palace equals this majesty. These cedars nearly touch the sky." But Enkidu shuddered. "This place is sacred. The gods themselves entrusted it to Humbaba. Look around. Even the birds sing more softly here, and the beasts hide in the thickets. We are entering a world that is not ours." Gilgamesh placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. That is precisely why we must advance. If we retreat, our name will be forgotten, but if we triumph, our deeds will be sung in every city. They ventured deeper. The ground became soft and silent beneath their steps. The air vibrated with an invisible force, as if the forest itself were watching them. At times, a distant crack resounded like a heavy step in the shadows. Each rustle made Enkidu start, but Gilgamesh gripped his weapon and advanced without faltering. Several times they thought they felt Humbaba's breath, a scorching wind passing through the trunks and making the branches quiver. Fear gripped Enkidu's heart, but Gilgamesh did not retreat. He raised his eyes to the invisible sun behind the canopy and whispered prayers to Shamash. When evening came, they set up camp at the foot of a gigantic cedar. The fire crackled, casting trembling shadows on the tense faces of the two companions. Enkidu spoke in a grave voice. "Brother, hear me. I am afraid, not of dying, for all men must die, but of defying the gods beyond what is permitted. Humbaba is not a mere monster. His voice is like thunder, his eyes like fire, and his steps shake the earth." Gilgamesh replied calmly, "I hear your fear, Enkidu, but remember what you told me after our fight. You would always be by my side. The gods brought us together for this. I do not wish to grow old and die without achieving a feat worthy of my name. If we triumph, we will be immortal in the memory of men." That night, Gilgamesh dreamed again. He saw himself walking with Enkidu, and suddenly a great fire erupted around them, yet he was not burned. Instead, the light enveloped him with new strength. In the morning, Enkidu interpreted it once more. "This is a sign that Shamash is with us. The sun god will watch over our battle." Then, somewhat reassured, Enkidu followed his friend. They plunged deeper into the forest, their steps echoing like a challenge to Humbaba. The moment was approaching when they would stand face to face with the fearsome guardian. And in the shadows, among the ancient trunks, a powerful breath was already rising, heavy and menacing. Humbaba knew they were there. The destiny was in motion. Part 3. The Victory over Humbaba. The cedar forest darkened as if night were falling in broad daylight. Between the immense trunks, the air was thick, charged with an invisible power. The silence was broken only by a deep, heavy breath that seemed to vibrate in the earth itself. Enkidu stopped, placing a hand on Gilgamesh's shoulder, his eyes fixed on the shadow from which the breath came. "He is there," he whispered. Then, from among the trees, the colossal silhouette of Humbaba, guardian of the forest, emerged. His size surpassed that of the cedars, his face twisted like bark, and his eyes blazed with a fiery glow. His scorching breath cut through the air like a furnace, and around him floated his 7 cloaks of aura, those invisible veils that made men tremble and turn their steps away. Humbaba spoke in a voice like thunder. "Who dares to enter the forest of the gods? Who dares to disturb my domain, entrusted by Enlil himself?" Gilgamesh stepped forward, brandishing his weapon. "I, king of Uruk, and this is my brother Enkidu. We have come to face the impossible, to end your tyranny and claim the glory you jealously guard." Humbaba laughed, a laugh that shook the trees and caused entire branches to fall. "Fools! The gods placed me here. I am the death that awaits the reckless. You will not leave alive." Then the battle erupted. Humbaba charged, his steps shaking the earth like earthquakes. His roar shattered the courage of ordinary men. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu did not retreat. Together, they launched themselves against him. Gilgamesh struck first, swinging his axe at the monster's flank. The blow resounded as if striking a mountain, but Humbaba, protected by his auras, barely staggered. Enkidu, with the speed of the step, attacked in turn, wielding his sword. Their blades gleamed, but each strike seemed to fade against the invisible power surrounding the guardian. Then Gilgamesh raised his eyes to the sky and called out to Shamash, "O sun god, come to our aid." And Shamash heard. Mighty winds rose, swirling through the forest. They struck Humbaba from all sides, blinding him, throwing him off balance. His cloaks of aura, one by one, were torn away by the divine storm. The guardian roared, and his cry echoed to the farthest mountains. Enkidu shouted, "Now is the moment, brother. Strike with all your strength." Gilgamesh charged. His axe fell in a flash of light, finally piercing the monster's flesh. Black blood gushed, and Humbaba staggered. But even wounded, the guardian tried to regain the upper hand. His eyes blazed with rage, and he cried out, "Mercy! Spare my life, Gilgamesh! If you let me live, I will become your servant, and the cedars will be yours." Gilgamesh hesitated. His heart, shaken by the monster's voice, wavered between compassion and duty. But Enkidu, standing by his side, whispered harshly, "Do not listen to him. It is a lie. Humbaba is but cunning and deceit. If you spare him, he will regain his strength, and the gods will turn against us. Finish him, for this is why we came." Then Gilgamesh, regaining his resolve, raised his axe again. With a final surge, he brought it down on the guardian's neck. Humbaba let out a terrible cry, so loud it shook the mountains. Then his immense body collapsed in a crash of broken branches. The Cedar Forest trembled as if struck by a storm, and Humbaba's breath was extinguished forever. Silence returned. The trees, immense witnesses, seemed to bow under the weight of destiny. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, panting, covered in sweat and dust, looked at each other. They had triumphed. They cut down the tops of the tallest cedars and crafted massive beams, which they tied into rafts. These precious woods they would bring back to Uruk to build colossal gates and offer the temples the splendor of their feet. But as they gazed upon Humbaba's remains, a shadow passed over their hearts, for Enkidu knew better than Gilgamesh that the gods would not remain silent in the face of this killing. Humbaba was not a mere enemy, but the servant of Enlil, master of wind and storms. "Brother," said Enkidu, "we have won glory, but we have also drawn the wrath of the immortals." Gilgamesh, his eyes still shining with victory, remained silent. Deep down, he knew Enkidu was right. But already in his heart, the echo of the feat resounded louder than the fear of the gods. Thus ended the battle against Humbaba. The king of Uruk and his brother had accomplished the impossible. But in the heavens, the gods began to stir, and their wrath would soon descend upon the two heroes. Chapter 3. The Vengeance of the Gods. Part 1. Ishtar and the Celestial Bull. The return of Gilgamesh and Enkidu to Uruk was a triumph. The city's inhabitants thronged the streets acclaiming their heroes. Priests recited hymns, musicians played songs of victory, and artisans were already carving the tale of the battle against Humbaba into clay and stone. The colossal gates carved from the cedars were installed in Enlil's temple, and the people, awestruck, praised the greatness of their king and his brother in arms. But in the heavens, the gods watched with displeasure. Humbaba, the guardian of the Cedar Forest, had been slain, and this sacrilegious killing had disturbed the established order. Some gods admired Gilgamesh's courage, others were scandalized by his audacity. Among them, one goddess above all was struck by the king's brilliance, Ishtar, the goddess of love, fertility, but also of war and destruction. From the heights of the celestial walls, she gazed upon Gilgamesh, his tall stature, broad shoulders, and blazing gaze. Her heart ignited with desire. She descended to Uruk and, adorned with sparkling jewels, necklaces, and precious veils, approached the king. She spoke in a voice both sweet and imperious. "Gilgamesh, be my husband. Offer me your love, and I will make you the supreme master. I will give you a chariot of gold and lapis lazuli, drawn by majestic lions. Kings will kneel before you. Peoples will bring you their riches. I will grant you glory and power beyond all that a man can desire." But Gilgamesh, standing tall, was not swayed. He knew Ishtar's reputation. Her loves were devouring flames that left ashes and ruins in their wake. So, without fear, he replied in a clear voice before the assembled people, "Goddess, your promises are beautiful, but your love is a trap. Look at the fate of your former lovers. Tammuz, whom you condemned to the underworld, the sparkling bird whose wings you broke, the lion you chained, the horse you exhausted with your cruel yoke, the gardener you turned into a wolf. All who loved you were betrayed. Why would I be different?" These words, spoken before all, were a terrible humiliation for Ishtar. The crowd, witnessing this audacious refusal, began to murmur. The goddess, flushed with anger and shame, flew back to the heavens. Her heart burned with rage, and she rushed before her father Anu, the supreme god. "Father," she cried, "Gilgamesh has insulted me. He rejected my love before all his people. Grant me the celestial bull that I may destroy Uruk and punish this arrogant man." Anu hesitated. "My daughter, if I send the celestial bull, its fury will cause a terrible famine. The crops will wither, men will die of thirst, and the balance of the world will be broken." But Ishtar persisted, her eyes blazing with rage. "If you refuse, I will open the gates of the underworld. The dead will rise and devour the living, outnumbering them." Faced with this threat, Anu yielded. He entrusted Ishtar with the reins of the celestial bull, a colossal creature, the incarnation of divine fury. When the beast descended to earth, its breath shook the hills, and its hooves struck the ground with the force of earthquakes. With each bellow, the earth split, swallowing dozens of men in its chasms. The river's waters dried up. The fields withered in an instant. Uruk trembled. The terrified people took refuge behind the walls, begging their heroes to save them. Then Gilgamesh, without hesitation, turned to Enkidu. "Brother, We defeated Humbaba. We can also slay the celestial bull." Enkidu nodded, though he felt the weight of the trial. Together, they charged at the beast. The bull snorted, and its breath scorched the air. Its hooves carved 3 immense chasms, swallowing hundreds of men. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu held firm. Enkidu approached first. With a daring move, he seized the bull by the horn, his muscles straining with effort, and held it still for a moment. "Strike, brother!" he cried. Then Gilgamesh raised his sword and plunged the blade into the monster's neck. The bull roared, its cry echoing to the heavens, then collapsed in a deafening crash. The people cheered, their shouts drowning out Ishtar's fury. The goddess, perched on the walls, burst into tears and curses. Enkidu, in a defiant gesture, tore off the bull's thigh and threw it at the goddess's face. "Here is your reward, Ishtar." Humiliated a second time, Ishtar fled to the heavens, screaming to her hatred. But in the restored silence, Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood tall, victorious once more. The people of Uruk exulted, celebrating their heroes. But in the heavens, the gods gathered. The killing of Humbaba, followed by that of the celestial bull, could not go unpunished, and already their judgment was being prepared. Part 2. The Death of Enkidu. After the fall of the celestial bull, Uruk vibrated with joy. The people acclaimed their 2 heroes, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, who had saved the city from certain destruction. The streets echoed with songs, the temples resounded with prayers of gratitude. Artisans were already engraving the tale of this feat on tablets, and the names of the 2 companions passed from mouth to mouth like a melody of glory. But in the heavens, thunder rumbled. The gods, gathered in council, were gripped by anger. The killing of Humbaba, sacred guardian of the Cedar Forest, and the slaying of the celestial bull, a creature sent by the heavens themselves, had disrupted the balance of things. What men hailed as a triumph, the gods saw as a crime. Enlil, master of the wind, rose with a terrible voice. "These 2 men have defied the divine order. They have slain Humbaba, my servant. They have killed the celestial bull sent by the heavens themselves. Their arrogance cannot go unpunished. One of them must die." Shamash, the sun god, protector of Gilgamesh, tried to intercede. But have they not acted with courage? Have they not accomplished feats worthy of legends? Their bravery is that which we ourselves inspired. Why punish them for following the path we set for them? But Enlil remained inflexible. Their strength has become excess. If we let them go unpunished, men will believe they can defy the gods. Let Enkidu be struck, and let Gilgamesh learn to fear the fate of mortals. Thus it was decided. Soon after, Enkidu had a dream. In his sleep, he saw the great gods assembled, and he heard their sentence. When he awoke, his face was pale, and his heart troubled. Gilgamesh, worried, asked what troubled him. Then Enkidu recounted, "Brother, I saw the gods. They have decided that I must die. It is the price of our victories." Gilgamesh shook his head vehemently. "No, it is not possible. We triumphed for the people. We accomplished what no one had done. The gods cannot condemn us for that." But Enkidu knew. Already his body weakened. A fever struck him, and his strength began to fade. He who once ran with gazelles and fought like a bull now lay confined to his bed, gasping. For 12 days, Enkidu battled the illness. His mind was assailed by visions. Sometimes he dreamed of the gods, sometimes of the underworld, that dark realm where the dead wander in dust. He saw a house where kings and warriors were clad in feathers, where they ate earth, and where light never entered. Each night he felt his breath drawing closer to that dread place. Gilgamesh, powerless, kept vigil at his bedside. He held his brother's hand, brought him water, whispered words of encouragement. But nothing could stop the decree of the gods. One day, in his delirium, Enkidu cursed those he believed responsible for his fall. He cursed the hunter who had discovered him in the steppe. He cursed Shamhat, who had led him to Uruk. But soon he calmed and recanted, "No, it is not you, Shamhat, who is to blame. Thanks to you, I knew the friendship of Gilgamesh. Thanks to you, I shared the bread of men and drank their wine. Thanks to you, I tasted true life." Then, turning to Gilgamesh, he said, in a weak but clear voice, "Brother, I must go, but do not forget me. Remember our battles, our friendship, our laughter, and our victories." Gilgamesh, his eyes filled with tears, replied, "How could I forget you? You are my brother, dearer than my own life. If you die, I will be but a shadow." Then, with a final breath, Enkidu passed. His body grew still, his eyes closed, and his soul departed for the underworld, where the dead rest without return. Gilgamesh, seeing his friend lying lifeless, let out a terrible cry that echoed through all of Uruk. He threw himself upon him, wept over his face, kissed his cold lips. He stayed 3 days and 3 nights by the body, refusing to believe Enkidu would not rise. But death, relentless, had claimed his brother. Then Gilgamesh rose, mad with grief. He covered himself in dust and rags. His hair hung in disarray, and he wandered the city like a lost man. The king of Uruk, once invincible, was now but a mortal, overwhelmed by sorrow. Thus died Enkidu, the wild man shaped by the gods, the faithful companion, the unforgettable friend. And Gilgamesh, broken by this loss, felt for the first time the weight of his own mortality. For if Enkidu, his equal, could die, then he too would not escape that fate. This was the beginning of his quest, a quest greater than all he had undertaken, the search for immortality. Part 3. The Grief and Rebellion of Gilgamesh. In the silent chamber where Enkidu lay, time seemed suspended. The walls of Uruk, so often resounding with shouts of joy or royal commands, were now but mute witnesses to unbearable grief. On the funeral bed, the wild man's body lay still, frozen in icy peace. His lips, which had laughed, shouted, sung, were closed forever. His eyes, which once shone with the light of the steppes, were shut to the world. Gilgamesh, kneeling at his side, wept without restraint. His tears flowed in torrents, wetting the cheeks of his departed brother. He, the invincible king, the proud demigod, was now but a broken man. His heart screamed with pain, and his body, though so powerful, bent like a reed in the wind. For 3 days and 3 nights he refused to abandon Enkidu. He stroked his tangled hair, clasped his cold hands, called his name again and again, hoping for a miracle. "Rise, brother, open your eyes. Do not leave me alone." But death, inexorable, held its prey. The priests, seeing the body stiffen, pleaded with Gilgamesh to accept the funeral rites. "Lord," they said, "honor your brother. Let him join the world of the ancestors." But Gilgamesh refused, shouting his rebellion against the gods and against fate. Finally, forced by the inevitable, he yielded. The body was prepared according to sacred rituals. It was anointed with perfumed oils wrapped in precious fabrics. The entire city gathered to mourn the one who had been more than the king's companion, a hero, a protector, an almost divine figure. Men and women covered themselves in ashes. The mourners sang dirges. Bread, wine, weapons, and jewels were placed beside Enkidu, so he would lack nothing in the afterlife. The entire people, as one heart, wept for the one who had loved life so fiercely. Gilgamesh, clad in rags, led the procession, his eyes bathed in tears. His voice broke as he delivered his eulogy. "O brother, you who were sent by the gods, you who confronted me and then loved me, you who walked by my side against Humbaba and the celestial bull, why have you been torn from me? Why has death taken you, whose breath was stronger than the mountain winds? If you, my equal, die, then who can hope to survive?" When the tomb was sealed, a great silence fell over Uruk. The cries, songs, and lamentations faded. But in Gilgamesh's heart, the tumult did not cease. On the contrary, his grief turned to vertigo. He now wandered the streets like a shadow. His royal garments were mere tatters. His hair hung in disorder. His face was hollowed by sorrow. He refused meals, no longer washed, and barely slept. The people looked at him with fear and pity. Their king was no longer the resplendent man of old, but a haunted being, consumed by fear. For stronger than the pain of grief, a thought gnawed at him. Death spares no one. Enkidu, whose vigor matched his own, had fallen. So too would he, Gilgamesh, one day be reduced to nothing. His powerful hands, broad shoulders, blazing eyes, all would one day wither and vanish into dust. This truth, which he had always pushed away, struck him with violence. Gilgamesh trembled, no longer only with grief, but with terror. Death, he understood, was the fate of all, and this thought drove him mad. He cried out in the streets, "Must I die like Enkidu? I, Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, son of the gods, builder of walls, tamer of lions, must I end in shadow, forgotten, reduced to dust? No, I will not accept it. I will not submit to the fate of mortals." His kin pleaded with him to regain reason, to resume his place as king. But Gilgamesh could no longer stay in Uruk, surrounded by memories that tormented him. Every street reminded him of Enkidu. Every stone bore his laughter. He felt a prisoner in his own city, a prisoner of the death to come. Then, in a gesture of rupture, he abandoned everything, his throne, his palaces, his riches, his glory. He cast them aside like empty shells. Clad in simple animal skins, his hair in disarray, he left Uruk on foot. His people watched him depart with astonishment and dread. Their king, once a demigod, was now but a lost wanderer in the desert. But Gilgamesh had not left without purpose. In his heart was etched an obsession to find Uta-Napishtim, the man who survived the flood, the only one to whom the gods had granted eternal life. If he had escaped death, then Gilgamesh would do the same. He walked day and night, crossing sun-scorched plains, arid valleys, rocky mountains. Hunger and thirst gnawed at him, but his desire to live forever was stronger than all. Each step resounded like a challenge to death. On the roads, he met men and women who looked at him with fear. His face was disfigured by pain, his eyes burned with an anxious flame. Some took him for a madman, others for a prophet. But none doubted that this man was walking toward an extraordinary destiny. Gilgamesh spoke only to himself, repeating endlessly, "I will find the secret. I will defy the gods. I will not die like Enkidu." Thus, driven by grief and rebellion, he ventured ever farther, leaving the known world to enter realms where no mortal had dared to tread. This was the beginning of his final great journey, the quest for immortality. Chapter 4. The Quest for Immortality. Part 1. The Wandering of Gilgamesh. The death of Enkidu was an earthquake in Gilgamesh's soul. He, the king of Uruk, the victorious hero who had slain Humbaba and the celestial bull, now wandered like a lost man. His royal garments were mere tatters, his hair matted with dust, and his face ravaged by tears. The people of Uruk, who had acclaimed him, now saw him drag himself through the streets, crying out to the heavens in grief, refusing the reality of death. For 3 days and 3 nights, he kept vigil over his brother's body, refusing to bury him, praying to the gods to bring him back to life. But death was inexorable. When he finally had to yield and entrust Enkidu to the earth, Gilgamesh understood with horror that the end awaited every man, even the mightiest. His heart filled with dread, he could not bear the thought of dying in turn, of being reduced to dust like the others. He, the 2/3 divine, how could he accept the law of death? Then a thought took root in him, consuming, to find immortality. Gilgamesh left Uruk. Alone, clad in animal skins, he plunged into the desert. His people watched him go in silence, their hearts heavy, for none knew if he would return. The king, once proud and splendid, became a wanderer, a beggar for eternal life. He walked day and night, crossing mountains, traversing arid valleys. Hunger and thirst accompanied him, but his obsession was stronger than his needs. With each step, he repeated to himself, "I will find the secret. I will not die like Enkidu. I will defy death itself." On his path, he encountered wild beasts, lions, scorpions, creatures of the night. But instead of fleeing, he threw himself upon them, as if to test his strength once more. Sometimes he felled them, sometimes he frightened them with his sheer fury. The entire world seemed his enemy, and he advanced like a solitary storm. One evening, as the sun set behind steep mountains, he reached the edge of the known world, where the sky touches the earth. There lived 2 fearsome guardians, a pair of scorpion men, monstrous creatures with half-human, half-beast bodies that gleamed like bronze scales. Their gaze pierced to the depths of souls, and no mortal dared approach them. When Gilgamesh arrived, the guardians were struck with fear. One said to the other, "Do you see this man? His stature is that of the gods, but his face is marked by the suffering of mortals. What does he seek in this forbidden place?" Gilgamesh spoke to them without trembling. I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. I seek Uta-Napishtim, the one who survived the flood and knows the secret of immortality. Let me pass." The scorpions observed him for a long time. Their voice resounded like thunder. "Gilgamesh, no man crosses this passage. Beyond these mountains lies the path of the sun, a tunnel of darkness that only the solar disk traverses each day. If you enter, you will be swallowed by the shadows and die." But Gilgamesh insisted, his voice vibrant with despair. "I have seen my brother Enkidu die. I will not bear the same fate. If I must perish, let me at least perish seeking eternity. But let me try my chance." The guardians, moved by his determination, granted him passage. Then Gilgamesh entered the tunnel of the sun. There he walked in thick darkness, blacker than death. The silence was total, and the ground vanished beneath his feet. For 12 hours he advanced, blind, guided only by the rage to live. Finally, a light appeared. Dawn. The tunnel opened onto a marvelous garden where trees bore fruits of precious stones. Pomegranates sparkled like rubies, grapes gleamed like pearls, and branches carried leaves of emerald and lapis lazuli. Dazzled, Gilgamesh understood he was nearing the world of the gods. There, at the edge of the cosmic sea, lived Siduri, the divine tavern keeper, guardian of a mysterious inn. She saw him arrive, haggard, clad in skins, his face hollowed by fatigue. "Who are you, traveler?" she asked. "I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk," he replied. "I have lost my brother, and I seek Uta-Napishtim to learn from him the secret of eternal life." Siduri shook her head. "Gilgamesh, why do you pursue what cannot be attained? The gods have reserved immortality for themselves alone. You enjoy life, eat, drink, love, rejoice in each day. That is the lot of mortals." But Gilgamesh did not yield. His eyes still burned with the same flame. "No, I will not settle for that. Show me the way to Uta-Napishtim, or I will not leave this place." Siduri, frightened by his determination, finally pointed him to the ferryman of the waters of death, Ushanabi, the sailor. Gilgamesh had to cross the cosmic sea to reach the island where Uta-Napishtim, the immortal man, lived. Thus he resumed his journey ever farther, ever more desperate. Each step took him further from the world of men and closer to the boundary of the gods. Part 2. The Meeting with Uta-Napishtim and the Tale of the Flood. After long wanderings, Gilgamesh finally reached the shores of a mysterious sea no mortal could cross. Its waters were dark and still, stretching endlessly like a mirror of the sky. This was the Sea of Death, the ultimate frontier that only the gods could traverse. On its shores lived Ushanabi, the ferryman. He was a weathered sailor surrounded by strange objects and magical stones that guided his boat. When Gilgamesh approached, exhausted, covered in rags, Ushanabi looked at him with astonishment. "Who are you, traveler? Whose stature is that of a king, but whose face is marked by suffering?" "I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk," he replied in a hoarse voice. "I have crossed mountains and darkness. I have defied lions and scorpions, and I have passed through the sea of dreams. I seek Uta-Napishtim, the one who survived the flood, to learn from him the secret of immortality." Ushanabi nodded. "The crossing is perilous. These waters are forbidden to men. But if such is your will, I will take you. Cut 300 poles, and with them we will advance without my hands touching the sea of death." Gilgamesh, despite his fatigue, obeyed. He cut the poles, loaded them onto the boat, and they set off. For days he planted the poles one by one, pushing the vessel forward. With each pole exhausted, he cast its remains into the dark waters. Finally, after expending all his strength, they reached a verdant island, lost at the edge of the world. There lived Uta-Napishtim, the immortal man, the distant survivor of a vanished humanity. Gilgamesh, his heart pounding, approached him. He saw an old man sitting under a tree, serene, whose eyes shone with ancient wisdom. He looked like any mortal, and Gilgamesh, surprised, asked, "Are you truly Uta-Napishtim, the one who escaped death? How did a man like you obtain eternal life?" Then Uta-Napishtim raised his voice and told his story, the great flood that had destroyed the world of the ancients. Long ago, the gods grew weary of men, too numerous, too noisy. They decided to erase humanity. Enlil, master of the wind, summoned the flood, a deluge so vast it would cover the entire earth. But Ea, the god of the waters, took pity on me. He spoke to me in a dream, warned me of what was to come, and said, "Man of Shuruppak, tear down your house, build a boat. Take with you the seed of all life. Bring your family, the artisans, the animals of the fields and forests. When the waters come, your vessel will float, and you will survive." I obeyed. I built a vast boat with sacred dimensions. Its length and width were equal, a perfect cube, and I covered it with pitch. I brought aboard my kin, my servants, my possessions, and the animals in pairs. Then the clouds gathered, the winds howled, the sky tore apart. The flood descended, more terrible than any storm. For 6 days and 7 nights, the waters covered the earth, swallowing mountains and valleys. Men cried out, but none answered them. The entire world was engulfed beneath the waters. Finally, on the 7th day, the sea calmed. Silence reigned. I opened a window, and light entered. I saw that humanity had vanished, that the earth was an endless ocean. My heart broke, but my vessel drifted to the peak of Mount Nisir, where it ran aground. I sent out a dove first. It returned, finding nowhere to land. Then I sent a swallow. It returned as well. Finally, I sent a raven. It did not return. Then I knew the waters had receded. I left the ship, offered a sacrifice to the gods. The scent of the fire and offerings rose to the heavens, and the gods gathered like flies. Enlil, at first furious to see me survive, was appeased by Ea. Then, to reward my fidelity, they granted my wife and me eternal life, placing our dwelling apart from men at the edge of the world. Uta-Napishtim fixed Gilgamesh with his calm eyes. "That is my story. But you, why do you seek immortality?" Gilgamesh, tears in his eyes, replied, "Because I saw my brother die. Because I do not want to become dust like him. Tell me the secret. Tell me how to escape death." The old man sighed. "Gilgamesh, eternal life is not for men. The gods have reserved it for themselves alone. You accept your fate. Enjoy your days, love. Rule with wisdom, and let your name live in the walls of Uruk." But Gilgamesh, desperate, fell to his knees. "No, you survived the flood. You found the secret. There must be a way. Show it to me." Then Uta-Napishtim, moved by pity, agreed to reveal a trial. Part 3. The Trial of Immortality and the Plant of Youth. Uta-Napishtim, the immortal elder, observed Gilgamesh for a long time. The king of Uruk, exhausted by his journeys, had a face hollowed by pain and determination. Despite his pride, one could see in him the vulnerability of a man who refused to accept the fate of all mortals. Then, in a surge of compassion, Uta-Napishtim decided to propose a trial. "Listen to me, Gilgamesh," he said. "If you truly wish to conquer death, prove it. Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, for he who can resist sleep may perhaps resist death." Gilgamesh agreed. Confident in his strength, he sat down, determined to endure. But no sooner had he settled than sleep, like a heavy mist, fell upon him. His eyelids closed despite his will, and he fell into a deep slumber. His wife, observing the scene, turned to Uta-Napishtim. "Look at him," she said. "The trial has not even begun, and he is already asleep. How can a man hope to escape death when he cannot even escape sleep?" To prove his failure, each day she baked a loaf of bread and placed it beside Gilgamesh. The first became dry and hard, the second shriveled, the third grew moldy. Thus, on the 7th day, 7 loaves bore witness to the length of his sleep. When Gilgamesh finally awoke, he protested. "I only closed my eyes for a moment." But Uta-Napishtim showed him the loaves, irrefutable proof that he had slept 7 full nights. The king bowed his head. For the first time, he understood that the task he pursued was vain. Sleep and death are brothers, and no man can push them away. Then, moved by pity, Uta-Napishtim revealed another secret. "Gilgamesh, though you failed the trial, I wish to offer you one last hope. In the depths of the sea grows a marvelous plant. It resembles a bush, but its thorns prick like those of a wild rose. If you obtain it, it will restore youth to whoever eats it. It may not be immortality, but it is a precious gift." Gilgamesh's heart ignited with new hope. So, weighting his feet with heavy stones, he threw himself into the dark waters of the sea. The current pulled him toward the depths, but he swam with the strength of a bull. At last, he glimpsed the shining plant, rooted in the abyss. He tore it free and, released from his weights, rose to the surface. Gasping, he emerged from the water and brandished the plant triumphantly. "I have it," he cried. "With this plant I will bring youth back to Uruk. I will share it with the elders. I will give it to my people. We will know a renewed life." He was filled with enthusiasm and his eyes shone with joy. But fate, ever cruel, had prepared a final trial. On the return journey, Gilgamesh and Uruk stopped by a clear spring. Exhausted by his travels, the king set down the plant to wash. As he plunged into the water, a serpent, drawn by the plant's scent, slithered from the grass. Swift as lightning, it coiled around the treasure, bit it, and swallowed it whole. Gilgamesh, hearing the rustle, turned back too late. The serpent was already slipping away into the thickets. As it left, it shed its old skin, renewing itself as if to mock the man who could not preserve eternal youth. Then Gilgamesh collapsed to the ground, his hands empty. His tears flowed again. "What's the use?" he said. "I have crossed the world. I have defied the gods. I have faced the sea and the darkness, and yet fortune escapes me again. All is in vain. He remained downcast for a long time, but gradually a strange serenity began to settle within him, perhaps because he finally understood that eternal life was not meant for men, perhaps because, despite his failure, he had walked a path that had transformed him. With Uruk, he resumed the journey to Uruk, his hands empty, but his heart heavier with wisdom. The Lesson of Gilgamesh. Thus ends the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest tales, inscribed on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, yet still vibrant with timeless truth. We have seen the king of Uruk in all his greatness and all his weakness. Mighty, almost divine, he dominated his people with pride until the day the gods sent him an equal, Enkidu, the wild man born of the earth. From their duel was born a sacred friendship, stronger than steel, more precious than glory. Together they accomplished titanic feats, slaying Humbaba, the guardian of the Cedar Forest, and defeating the celestial bull sent by Ishtar. But these victories came at a cost. The gods, offended by such audacity, demanded a tribute, and Enkidu died. His loss shattered Gilgamesh, revealing to his eyes the inevitable horror of death. Then, mad with grief, he abandoned his throne and embarked on an impossible quest to defy fate and wrest from the gods the secret of immortality. From mountains to deserts, from darkness to marvelous gardens, he walked tirelessly until he met Uta-Napishtim, the survivor of the flood, the one to whom the gods had granted eternal life. But Gilgamesh failed his trial. Even the plant of youth, which he had torn from the depths of the sea, was stolen from him by a serpent. So he returned to Uruk, his hands empty, but his soul transformed. There, gazing upon the immense walls he had built, he understood that his name would live not through an immortal body, but through his works, through memory, and through the tales passed down through the ages. Gilgamesh, the proud king, became Gilgamesh the wise. His journey had not conquered death, but it had given it meaning. And perhaps this is the true message of this millennia-old epic. Immortality is not in the flesh, but in what we leave behind, our friendships, our works, our stories. Even today, 4 millennia later, we speak his name, Gilgamesh, and as long as we tell his story, he will never truly be dead. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey through history. I hope this tale has brought you peace and wonder. Don't forget to subscribe to Twilight Tales for more stories to guide you into a serene sleep. Take care and see you soon.